Well, hey, welcome to the second episode of What's God Doing? My name is Willie, and you are watching my channel. We're all about biblical motivation, inspiration, and teaching, helping you to understand the Bible plain and simple. And did you know one of the best quotes, my favorite quotes of Dr. Martin Luther King says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And in 1963, Dr. King boldly and courageously charged us to carry a dream he had of equality. You know that sadly has been almost 60 years, 57 to be exact, and we're still living in a time that doesn't allow that dream's realization. And so for me to pretend to have this platform and pretend that we live in an equal society would be for me to live in a world full of delusion, which is why I'm excited to host this second episode of What's God Doing with my friend Cliff Blevins. Cliff, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you.
Good to see you. So we both made it on safe and secure. I can see some people watching. So guys, if you're there, give us a thumbs up. Give us some hearts over on Facebook. We're live on YouTube and Facebook. And this conversation's happening live. Me and Cliff are talking to each other just right now, and you're able to comment in the comment section wherever you are. And share that with a friend. Leave us comments. We want you to be a part of this conversation as well. We're going to be talking about racial equality. And specifically what we see God is doing. And so, Cliff, how are you? I said, how are you? But I didn't really give you a good chance to talk.
Man, I'm doing great, Matt. And thank you for using your platform to address such a relevant issue, an important issue that's happening in our world right now. So many times as believers, we're accused of being distant from the societal ills and what's going on around us in the political environment, all those different things. We're accused of being distant. And so I'm so glad that you gave us, allowing us this platform to kind of, not point fingers, but just have a discussion about issues and things like that. And I guess Matt's done his intro, but I can I give you like the genesis of where how
yeah, man, give it. Yeah, go ahead.
Of course, many of us already know what the tragedy that happened to Ahmaud Arbery. And Matt posted something on his Facebook page and Instagram page. And when I read it, it struck me as really sincere, really from the heart, really kind of from a point of what can I do to help the situation get better? How can I grow through this? And how can we all grow through this? And so I believe it was Friday night, Matt, where I called you and I was like, hey, man.
Yeah,
I really
out of the blue, actually.
Yeah, I really appreciate the sincerity that when people write things, you can tell the sincerity of it. I don't know if he had, any intention of ever me reaching out to him, but when I reached out to him, we just started having a conversation, and within the midst of that conversation, excuse my dog, within the midst of that conversation, I could even, can I give him a little bit behind the curtain, Matt? That I noticed some trepidation, a little bit of trepidation in his voice of how navigating the conversation, because there is a lot of hurt in the Black community. And I noticed he was kind of walking, around a little bit. And I said, hey, man, listen, if we're friends, we should be able to talk clearly, openly, and, concisely about these things without us worrying about offending each other. And, biblically, we should be able to talk to people about issues and not worry about the spirit of offense and things like that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, man, you need to give that dog a T-bone or something.
I know, man. I think the T-bone's probably bigger than the dog, but
yeah,
sorry about that.
No, okay.
But anyway, and I said, Matt, if you and I are going to be friends beyond the 4-year relationship, we've got to be able to have these kind of issues, because if we're all going to, when these kind of things happens that are, uncomfortable for us, and we all go into our corners and point fingers and say, you're the problem. No, you're the problem. No, I've done something about the problem. Then it ends up this circular kind of firing squad and nothing ever gets done. And so, as Matt said, 57 years ago, Martin Luther King, I have a dream speech, and we're still kind of dealing with a lot of the same issues.
Yeah. Well, and, I guess, we were going to ask each other, kind of what struck us about the Ahmaud Arbery tragedy. And so I guess, just talking about that and being transparent, what was something that really struck you? I know that I wasn't expecting you to call me or anything like that. And And if you are watching this on the replay, I will leave a little link in the card so you can see the video. I'm actually working on a video, to showcase kind of, I guess, what I did. I didn't really expect it, but I do want to use the platform to spread the message and kind of honor Ahmad, with the hashtag I run with Ahmad.
Right.
They left off the Ahmad part and
Right.
they just put his last name. But
Right.
so I wasn't really expecting that, and really I was just trying to share my heart and just, when you see something along those lines and you feel like, we have come so far as a country. I couldn't believe that it had been that long since Dr. King had given that speech. One of the most recent books I read was called The Dream King, or it's called The Dream King, by Matt Lockett and Will Ford. And they do, their ancestors actually, one was a slave owner and the others were slaves. And they came from the same place. And it was actually where the Civil War ended. The last shot that was fired on that land. And they told a story. It's a real account. They have the diaries and they have this pot, this cast iron pot. I mean, huge cauldron, I guess you could say. And the slaves would go in there and the slave masters would whip them for praying. And so at night they would sneak into the barn and pray into this almost like a prayer bowl, because it would muffle their mouth enough to where they couldn't hear them praying out loud. And I'm like, well, why didn't they just pray quietly or whisper? But they had such a conviction, that's always stuck with me. They had such a conviction. They didn't care about being whipped. One of them even died from being whipped so hard.
Wow.
They didn't care about that. They just wanted to pray to God that this would end and be over. And for the last shot to be fired on that ranch, I mean, it was just incredible. Wow. It's a great, great book. And so that's like, and then it goes into what Martin Luther King did and just all those things. And so I haven't watched the video. I just, I've seen the clips they played on news or whatever. I don't really like watching that stuff. Right. It really bothers me.
It desensitizes you too if you see it enough.
Yeah. And so, it just really struck me that, like, man, I just read that book and, they do a great job of restoration and praying. And it is a cool story. Yeah. They still have that prayer bowl and how their families have come together. Now they're praying, things that Martin Luther King would pray about, would talk about, that my children and their children would be able to come together, and then they are coming together. I mean, it's really good. Yeah. But did that happen that many years ago? And then here we are watching this stuff on the news and nothing really being done until it became this huge ordeal. That was like, I don't know, 60 days later or something. I forget. All my days are running together with this COVID stuff. But, so that's kind of what struck me. What got you? I know you were saying you have sons and daughters, or a son and daughters. And so just kind of, you were sharing how close it hit to home for you. Right.
It hit to home again. I think Matt and I, I guess one of the disclaimers, we're not here to adjudicate the case or anything like that. Well, the thing is, we have a justice system that's supposed to function a certain way. But it struck me because my son's in the Air Force. He just purchased a new home. He's 24 years old, and he's a black kid, and he likes to jog in his neighborhood. And there's still new construction going on there. And I could only imagine, right, the hurt that I would feel if something like that, if somebody just decided, even not even getting to the point where there's a murder or a death, but decided to stop him, right, because they suspected him of doing something, or he looked like he didn't belong in that neighborhood. And so that struck me. And it's like, man, this could happen anywhere. And in the moment we, as believers, as Americans, realize that this can happen anywhere at any time. Yeah. And my challenge, and I wish I was technically savvy enough that I wanted to really to have it resonate with me. Take the name Ahmaud Arbery out of the headline and put my son's name there and just stare at it, so it can resonate, right? And I would challenge anybody to do that. Take his name out and put your son, your grandson, your niece, your nephew, your daughter, anybody. Put their name there and see how much their police record from 6 years ago makes a difference, or see how much their misgivings or some of their issues that they may have in life, see how much it makes a difference. And so many times we've seen, the first thing is we know their police record, but I'm pretty sure those people that committed this travesty didn't have his background report with them.
Right.
So
they didn't have it in their back pocket or whatever.
They didn't have his back pocket with his social security number, anything like that. So they didn't know. So why is that relevant right now? But the thing, and I'll be honest, because this is the forum we said we're going to be honest and open.
Yeah.
When you asked one of the first questions, what really struck you about the tragedy, and the jaded part of me said, in order for me to be shocked by something, I have to have an expectation of the opposite. Mm. And so many times I've seen these things happen and nothing get done about it, or the prosecutor doesn't indict or anything like that. There's an old saying, a good prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich, right? If you try. And because I guess the threshold for indictment is so low. And so when I'm seeing it, I'm like, well, I didn't really have an expectation of any response or anything. I just expected this to kind of be swept under the rug, all those different things. But then the other part of me, I start seeing people like you. I had texts from Bishop Suber, Pastor Alex, some of our other friends, with just calling me and it was sincere. What can I do? I'm sorry. I've seen Pastor Alex's post about, hey, what's the difference between me and Ahmaud Arbery? We both like to run. I like to look at new construction. And those things meant a lot to me. So I was kind of taken aback or struck by the voice that a lot of my friends that happen to be Caucasian, right? Okay, white. Some of my friends that happen to be white.
I'm questioning whether I could say black or African American.
Okay, you're good. You're good with me. I don't know about the audience, but I'm not that guy. So I had a joke, but
funny.
But I was actually pleased at their response to say, hey, listen, there's something wrong. And Matt and I were talking, you and I were talking before we start. The first problem in any walk of life, whether it's in drug addiction, criminal addictive, psycho, even marital relations, is to admit that there's a problem.
Right.
And too long, we as Americans, we have not admitted that there's still a problem. Slavery was 155 years ago, right? But I had a great grandmother that I know came from slaves.
Wow.
And so her attitudes and all those things were kind of passed down, to me, because we were in direct connection with her for, she died in late 1990s or early 1990s. And so we had a connection to her. So some of those traits, some of those habits, some of those thought patterns were passed down. So we're not that far, we act as if we're that far beyond slavery and the remnants of slavery, because we still have the remnants of Jim Crow. And so it struck me because, I'm like, man, now we have people's attention, and what do we do with people's attention? So my first response was, I wasn't shocked because I had no expectation. But then as I calmed down and I let my anger subside just a little bit, I'm still angry because I'm looking and saying, wow, even if he done those things that he did, there's a police force that are supposed to take those matters to their hands. And I was struck by the fact that somebody believed that for some reason they deserve an answer from somebody. We can't stop random citizens and tell them, hey, you deserve it. I need an answer from you while you're here. Let the police handle it.
Right. Well, and and the thing that I'd written that you said, grabbed your attention. I had recently started running and I had bought some new shoes that I was really excited for them. Like I almost shipped them because I was so excited to get them, but then that happened and I got the shoes and I was like, one of the things I was thinking of, and you're just kind of hitting on it, was, sometimes we're always like, oh, what can I do? What can I do? And, I can see some people watching this, and if you're there, definitely give us likes, hearts, and comments, all that. But, I was torn between what can I do and what will I do? And then having my daughters grow up in a world where their dad doesn't stand up for something he knows right.
Right.
That would hurt me even more, regardless of what skin color I have. And so I chose to take that run. Everybody was doing the hashtag I run with Mod. And so I was just like, I'm going to carry these with me in lieu of wearing them, and just kind of have empty pairs of shoes running with me, knowing that Ahmad can't do that anymore, or all the people that have died like him, because of the racial inequality that we have, or the things that do happen because of racism, or even if it isn't racism, like just stupidity, but it always seems like it's one way versus the other. You know what I mean? And so, and I remember my daughter usually rides her bike with me as I run, and I was running, and we got about halfway through, and she's like, "Why are you carrying those shoes?" Because I didn't want to say anything to her. I wanted to see if it made an impression on her. And she finally stopped, because we'd stop every once in a while. I have a little camera sometimes I take with me, and she's like, why are you carrying those shoes? I said, well, there's a man that was shot because of the skin color he had, and nothing was really done until all of us started seeing that video. And I said, and that's not right it's not right to treat somebody different because of the color of their skin. And she was upset, and came home and like had to talk with my wife, and was like very disturbed. And so to me, it was worth it just in that, knowing that I made an impression on my daughter. She didn't understand what I was talking about. She didn't understand why people would do that, So really, it's what I did do. And so if you're out there watching and you're wondering, what can I do to help? Decide what you will do. If it's to go buy a cup of coffee with somebody that looks different from you and just get their story. I mean, whole reason why I have Cliff on my channel right now is because he was just telling me some things that I didn't, be honest with you, as a white male, I just didn't know, and, I mean, I'm not scared to go jogging. I'm not scared to, when I was a kid, we'd play hide and go seek outside all the time. I'd jump fences. I'd hide in people's sheds. I'd hide in people's bushes. I'd be under their door. I never feared for my life, but I know that that's not the case for other people, And so, yeah, man, I
think like that part of the action that you took is invaluable for your children. Because it's a proven fact that we learn about how we treat other people that aren't like us directly in our family environment, right? And so, like I said, I even learned, things, to have certain prejudices when, growing up in my family because of where we grew up and the experiences that my family had growing up in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And so a lot of those things were kind of embedded in us. But once we kind of strip it down, we could probably go to a park. We weren't on stay-at-home orders, and you can have a 3-year-old white kid and a 3-year-old black kid, and they would naturally play together in the sand or on the swing. But at some point, where do they lose that naivete?
Yeah.
Right. Where does the mistrust come from? Right. Or the pull back in the distancing come from? Most of the time, it comes from in a family environment. Not that families are preaching hate, but just by our actions, where we see injustice and we don't speak out against it, or where our circle is not diverse. And so at some point kids begin to see that and they realize that we're different, and so it's at some point they push back against diversity until they get a certain age and able to, hopefully those things aren't embedded in them. And this is on all sides of the spectrum, all races. I mean, racism is a human condition. And so this is why I'm so surprised, man. It's like,
that's how you roll your eyes, man. It's okay,
man. It's like Animal Farm over, and I was feeling like I was really anointed right now. But
we call you Dr. Doolittle. Get a horse walk in or
something. And I told my whole family, "Hey, listen, this is my big moment. This is my coming out party." And then, we got this huge dog in the house. But at any rate, I even lost my train of thought. But they learn these kind of things by not just what we say, but what we don't do. And, looking at me, I don't have white friends or Hispanic friends. I have friends that happen to be white,
Hmm.
right? And I have friends that happen to be Hispanic. I have friends that happen to be Asian or whatever. I have friends but I don't befriend anybody simply because I need, a white dude to be my friend.
I
You know what I'm saying?
think
Right? Right. But our children see these things. And so they say the most segregated place in America is the church on Sunday. So we deal with people when we have to that are not like us most of the time at work. And then we go home and we have this tribalistic view of things and we kind of do our own thing. We may have a little bit of diversity sprinkled in, but if it's not part of our lifestyle, then it's kind of one of those things that our children learn just by osmosis.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, with that, what do you think? What do you think some practical steps you can we take, to
Right,
kind of individually or corporately, maybe as churches or,
right,
just as friends, what are some things that we can do to maybe
right,
shine some light on this, or,
right,
what do you think we can do?
right. What I would think is, if I use this word inclusive, it's kind of like a dirty word in terms of the gospel, because of how people have kind of made it a bad thing. But our churches should be welcoming to everybody,
Yeah.
right? And not in a condescending way, but in a legitimate. If we begin to look at everybody as created beings, right, in the image of not your creator, but our creator, right?
Yeah.
If that's our filter, that we're all created by the same God, and He created us all equal. It's not about what a Declaration of Independence says or Constitution says, but it's actually what God says about us. So we're all created in His image. So He's our creator. But I would say like some practical steps that I would do. And funny that you said you read that book, is that I would encourage every Caucasian person or whoever listening to read a book about the Black experience in America, right?
Yeah.
But don't filter it through, oh, that's their struggle. Filter it through the human struggle,
Right.
right?
That's so good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and combine it, because at the end of the day, we're all human, right? We're all human. We all walk this earth, and we're all going to have the same struggles. We all have more in common than what we probably would like to admit. And so read something about the Black experience, but filter it not through that's their struggle. That was then. This is now. We've already done all these things. We've given them all these different. I've heard all kind of arguments about how we're over this. We had a Black president. All these different things, but filter through the human experience, right? And then realize that we're not in this by ourselves. So we filter through the human experience. We realize that we're all human. Those are some practical steps. And another thing is welcoming diversity, not just for the sake of diversity, but what diversity brings to us. I'm enriched by having different opinions. I've got people in my circle that are much different than me. They play golf. I don't play golf, right? They fish. I don't fish, right? I've got all these people in my circle.
I've got a friend that has a sauna in his house. I can't get there.
But I've got friends that are different, and it's not on purpose. It's because I don't purposely go out and say, "Oh, let me go find a friend from Malaysia." No, I just like people,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I believe everybody has value. And so the moment we as believers believe that everybody has value, then we can start seeing people how God made us. And I guess another thing is, this is something I thought about, and it probably will kind of step on some toes, but from our pulpits in America, or probably around the world, I don't know, but I can only speak for America, that we hear more sermons or more passion from people about feminism, sexism, communism, socialism. In our daily discourse, we hear all these arguments from either side, right? On a passionate, hey, these are the ills of communism, these are the ills of socialism. But I would challenge most preachers, or a lot of preachers. I would challenge any preacher that's listening, a pastor, whoever, teacher, Bible teacher, to look at maybe if they've archived their sermons if they've been preaching for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. Go back and maybe do a search on your computer for your sermons, and look at how many sermons that you we've preached about lust, we've preached about lying, we've preached about all these different biblical moral issues, right? Which they're valid, abortion, all these different things, right? And look how many 2 or 3 part sermons we probably may have. And then type in racism or prejudice into that same search bar.
And then I'll do you another one. Do that and see if you can do it outside of February. Find one outside of February.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Right. Right. So yeah, we get that 1 month, the shortest, they say the shortest month of the year, but we'll take it. We'll take it.
Hey man, I wasn't there when that happened, so I'm sorry.
I know. I had a shirt that it says Black History Year, you know. But funny. Yeah, I would just challenge, just that challenge to say, okay, are we really, we say racism is a hard issue, right? But if it's a hard issue, then why don't we preach about it as a hard issue, right? More vehemently. Where are the 8-part series about it? I've certainly been in enough churches to preach 10, 12-week series on holiness, right? And holiness is a heart condition. But if racism is a heart condition, why aren't we preaching as much about that as a heart condition? If we really believe it, that's what it is, and that's how it can be solved and eradicated.
Yeah, man, so good. And so that kind of ties into what the kingdom response should be, I guess you could say.
Right.
But just overall as a leader, you're a father, a husband, an entrepreneur, a business owner, just a successful man. Almost slipped up there. But what are you encouraged by? We do see that we have this issue. We see ways that we could learn from our mistakes, or maybe, we talked about trying to, or not trying to, but just welcome diversity and know that this isn't a black issue, a white issue, but it's a human issue. Right. But what do you see as a leader? What are you encouraged by? Even though we're having this talk now, amid, in the midst of a tragedy, what encourages you right now?
I'm encouraged by the anger that people have seemingly showed, right? Because anger it's a natural emotion. I used to teach anger management classes. It's a natural emotion. It's a neutral emotion, right? Yeah. It's not a good or bad thing. It's neutral. It's what we do with the anger after we become angry. Do we get violent? Do we burn stuff down? Or do we have constructive dialogue? Or do we, again, start expanding our circle? Do we start mentoring people that are disadvantaged? Because a lot of these things aren't about race. It's about class. It's about social economic status and all these different things. But it just so happens that it ends up being a black and white issue. But the moment we realize that we can do some things in our life, okay, beyond the gospel of it being a heart condition, are we really connecting with people, right? Before it gets, I don't want to say too late, but before it gets to the point where, they're at risk, are we mentoring young people, right? Are we, there was an old, I guess, commercials or something, and they would, it was like a PSA, and if I'm rambling, let me know. But there was and be on the radio, and they would talk about, all these kind of hidden kind of dog whistle things that people would say. And it would be like a conversation that you and I are having. Hey, I love Cliff. And you're like, yeah, he's pretty good. He's pretty articulate for a black guy, So, and so anytime we see those kind of things, we shouldn't be silent about it. We shouldn't let people make it, and I've kind of resolved that anybody in my circle can't be silent. It can't be silent. I'm not saying we need to protest, and march down, but I am saying that you have to take a stance on it, right? Yeah. Whether you and I are probably not going to agree on everything related to race, but I love you, and I believe I gave this illustration to one of my team members today, and it's the illustration of a football field, and I believe that most people, this is Cliff, right? There's got the 50-yard line in the middle, and on either side of the football field, you have the 40-yard line. I believe, this is me, that most people dwell politically, socially within those 2 40-yard lines. But it's amazing how the people that are at the 10-yard line on either side are the ones yelling the loudest, and they get most at the biggest extremes. You would think that these extremists are the ones that's actually the majority, but they're not. And so to realize that we we do have a voice, right? And how do we practically just go ahead and just start reaching people, right, from a kingdom perspective?
Yeah,
so.
That's a great point. And kind of to just jump onto that, I was, like I said, I was surprised when you called me and you started thanking me for the post, and I didn't, think nothing of it. I just wanted to share my support for the hashtag and acknowledge that something had been done like that. Right. And so, but then to hear you, one of the things that I would encourage other people to do, regardless of which side of the fence you're on, or, what color you may be or skin, whatever, just, like you're saying, there was hesitation in my voice when I was trying to talk back to you. Right. I just didn't want to offend you, but I found it was more freeing to me just to say, hey man, we're brothers. We can just talk. Like it, just know that like I may slip up just out of stupidity or whatever, but the conversations need to be had regardless.
Right.
And just lower the fences a little bit to where you don't be offended as much easily when you're having good, solid conversations. Right. And I think that's where we start, I guess. Right. If we're so far away, we're almost 60 years from the I Have a Dream speech, but nobody talks about it. Like nobody says anything. We all have our Facebook posts and we'll hide behind our phones and everything, but nobody has these face-to-face conversations like you are and having. This is as face-to-face as we can get right now. Sure. Like, and so, but I think that's important. It may be hard to say, hey man, I just want to hear your history as a black man, or as a white man or whatever, like that to me meant a lot that you would call me and say, and just start telling me those things. And then you and I had it was a 45-minute conversation.
At least. Yeah.
And to me that meant a lot to know that you actually cared about my opinion, and that I actually, I didn't know it was going to be a big deal, but it was to you. And so that made it even more special to me, because that one of my friends, it helped them to realize that, hey, they are on my side, or regardless of side, just we're brothers, even outside the church, in friends and everything else, like all the different things that you and I connect on. Now we have something else that we connect on, that we're for human rights, regardless of skin color,
Exactly.
And so those conversations can be hard, but I think they're necessary,
And it can't be, a lot of times, even in relationships, we say, well, we've had this conversation once, or we've had it twice. And who's to say you don't get a breakthrough on the third conversation that you have about it, right? And so we've got to continue to have dialogue and continue, again, like you said, lower the fences, right? And so put my guards down, so I'm not looking for buzzwords. If you stop and say "you people," I don't automatically shut down the conversation. He didn't say that, everybody. But sometimes we have these conversations, but we don't have them honestly, right? And so I open the door for anybody. If you don't agree with me, I'm cool with it. It's my opinion, right? Yeah. But I do believe that we should have dialogue on, in uncomfortable, not just. We agree on. There may be a case down the road, right? That something happens, another tragedy that we just don't see eye to eye on, right? Yeah. But at least biggest thing, I think we should put ourselves in other person's shoes. And if we do that, again, that's why I said, what if you put your son, daughter, nephew name in there and replace Ahmaud Arbery's name with one of those people? It would hit home. Yeah. It would hit home, right? And so that's basically what I think our response should be, right? Continued dialogue, and eventually dialogue should lead to something, right? Constructive dialogue should lead to some action.
Yeah. And I like that you said that maybe 1 or 2 or 5 conversations didn't end the way that you thought they would. Like, we're just going to have another one of these conversations. You and I pastored before, and it's always like, oh man, I see the same kid down there. I see the same kid at the altar call every week. I'm like, bro, what happened? It's just been a week.
I thought we corrected the issue, right?
But as pastors, we don't just say, okay, well, hey, you know what? You came down here last week and the week before. I think you've had your fill. That's not what God does to us. There's always, every morning we wake up, there's mercy
every day
and grace. And so it's not like he's like, man, you sinned that way once, so I'm sorry, you just don't get it. And so I think that, let's have a little grace for each other, and understand that I may say things unknowingly,
Right,
and so, and I'm trying to just, do this. I've got family past and stuff, just like you were saying, you were raised certain ways. I was raised certain ways, but we can still have conversations now. And so I'm glad that you said that, because I think that is important for anybody.
I almost going to put you on the spot and let you confess. I confessed. Some of my family passed to you. We grew up where we had these imaginary lines that we couldn't go beyond, right? Where don't go over there. We've even been in neighborhoods we would have to walk around the whole neighborhood.
Wow.
When going to school was the shortest route, because there was a group, there was a community that we weren't welcome in, and it was across the tracks. So we would literally have to walk maybe at a half a mile to a mile to our walk to school, because we could not, literally, this is 1980s.
Wow.
1980s. We could not go through that neighborhood without being harassed, chased, or whatever. So,
man. Well, thankfully, I never had to deal with that, but I did go to a Christian private school. I was pretty boring.
Right.
So anyway, I don't have much to say on that one, but that's crazy that in the 1980s, man. And so looking up, I spent the last couple of days and today really just listening to Dr. Martin Luther King. And one of the things that really blew me away, and I kind of told you about this before we hopped on, but how when he spoke to somebody or he addressed a crowd or whatever, he was talking to the best possible person that person could be. Like if he was sitting here in on this conversation, I hope he'd be proud of our conversation, but he would be talking to the best possible version of Matt and the best possible version of Cliff. One of the quotes that I'll just go ahead and read, it says, he said, "So set out to do a good job and to do that job so well that the living, the dead, and the unborn couldn't do it any better. If it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Leontyne Price sings before the Metropolitan Opera. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well." And I was like, man, that's, at first I heard that. I was driving today and I was listening to just his speeches. And I was like, I got to look that one up, because that one stuck with me. And then I found out that he said that to a junior high group of kids, 7th and 8th graders.
Wow.
And I was like, man, he could say that to a 50-year-old group of, like, hey, man, we're retiring. You know what I mean? Like retiring at 50, but But you know what I mean? Like, I couldn't believe the way that he talked to people.
Right.
And even in, he was encouraging, the African-American community. But at the same time, all these words could be applied because they're gospel flavored words.
Right.
He was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.
Right.
And I love that. And so, I hope that you're inspired today. If you're watching this, definitely share it with your friends, share it with people. We want to get this conversation out. And so every share, every like, every comment really does help spread this word and everything else. And so another thing that I listened to a lot of Myles Monroe, really respect and love him as well. But he said, whatever gift God buried in you to come to the planet to manifest, you still have that gift now, even if you've never used it before. And in Romans 11:20-9, it says, for God's gifts and his call are irrevocable.
Yeah.
And so whoever you are, I can see people liking and commenting and viewing, know that God placed gifts inside of you, not gifts like funny pictures, but gifts. and they're irrevocable. And he's just waiting for you to activate those. And so it's amazing that the gifts that Cliff has may not be the same gifts I have, but the world needs you, man. Like the world needs what you have. And the world needs the gifts I have. And for me to say, nah, I'm not going to use them or whatever, like that's fine, but nobody's going to get to experience those gifts, right?
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, man, if you're out there and you're watching, we've been going for about 40 minutes now. Cliff, do you have any final things you wanted to add or say?
No, thank you, Matt. It's been great. I was so nervous for this. I mean, I'm horrible at selfies. So this is like so foreign to me.
You got to throw those deuce fingers up and do
exactly. I would just, I guess, piggyback on Matt. Realize, as we're all maybe different, we probably, we have a lot more in common than what we think or we like to admit. And so a lot of times maybe our political bend or, our political views or societal views kind of interfere with our view of the gospel. And that should never, ever happen, right? Our ethics and morals and how we judge things shouldn't be filtered through an afternoon talk show or a late night talk show, cable news or anything like that, whether it's MSNBC, CNN, Fox, whatever. Our culture, our Christian culture shouldn't be filtered through those. It should be filtered through the gospel, right? That God is no respecter of person, right? And we should seek to do justly before people. And so that should be kind of like how we operate as believers and not through, whatever the culture is saying. We should be changing the culture.
Right. So good. Well, we are doing this live, so I will open this up to comments and questions. If you guys have any comments for myself or Cliff, definitely type those in. We'll give you a couple of seconds to do so. We definitely would love to hear from you. That's the whole point of doing these live broadcasts and not just, filming ourselves and then putting it up there. We want you to be a part of these live conversations I do called What's God Doing? And so, Cliff, I have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
Which you weren't prepared for. This is the live.
It's good, bro.
It's good? Okay.
Look, I'm born ready, baby.
All right. When sports come back, what is your favorite sport you're looking forward to?
The Cleveland Browns football. I seen the Dallas Cowboy Cleveland Browns schedule, and I said they want $1,000 a ticket for it, so I'm not going to go to that.
They might lower the price now. They need to get those seats filled up.
I hope so, but I think football. I'm sorry.
Football? Yeah, I'd have to say the same thing. Yeah. I'm more of a NCAA fan, so
okay.
I'm a big Buckeye fan. Yeah, but I do like the Cowboys, so I watch them. All right, and then steak or chicken?
I would say chicken, but I'll leave that joke alone.
Come on. That's funny.
I say steak.
Okay. That's funny. Awesome. Well, if you guys
ask you, you
gotta ask me. Oh man, I'm steak all the way.
Steak all the way. Okay.
Although I eat chicken more, I've been running and all that since the quarantine, and so I've been meal prepping and all that, and it's just easier to throw a bunch of chicken in a crock pot and measure it out. Yeah, so
for sure.
Steak has more fat in it. I got to watch my calories and blah, blah, blah.
Okay, got you. I got you.
Yeah. All right. Can you see the comment?
Oh, gosh.
All right.
There's a question.
Yep. Let's read it. It says, besides just acknowledging the injustices that have and are happening, what are further steps to take? That's a great question, Whitney. Thank you for asking.
That's my daughter. We call her Martin Luther Queen.
Martin Luther Queen.
We call her Martha Luther Queen, but
okay, Martha Luther. Martha Luther. Oh, that's a tongue twister.
But no. But I would say this on a practical level, right? Because even in this case, the video, it seems like the police may have had the video as soon as it happened on the same day, right? And it wasn't shown until it was 74 some odd days later. So I would encourage people when we're voting, so many times we get caught up in national elections right, in senatorial elections. But when we're talking about, electing DAs and prosecutors,
Right.
right, we've got to be really in tune to those people, because those are people that are actually on the ground. That if you're ever going to come in contact with the criminal justice system, they're going to be the ones that you're going to have to deal with. And so we a lot of times from a conservative perspective, we want somebody that's tough on crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we should never filter through being tough on crime. We should filter through what's the person that's going to administer justice, right? And so a lot of times they're soft on crime, they're tough on crime, but what person is going to be the one that's going to administer justice, right?
Yeah.
And those are just some practical things, I think.
No, that's great. And I think a lot of people sleep on that, and just, the big ones come out every 4 years when we do the presidential election and all the ones that come with that and the different voting on certain laws or whatever. So yeah, that's great, because those come around. Some of those come around every 2 years, and a lot of people just don't pay attention to them. They just think, oh, it's just another thing or whatever. Or even, one other thing that I really learned is don't just vote party because your parents voted for it, or don't vote straight party because that's what I've always done. Like, take the time, go back to I think I remember doing projects when I was in 8th grade and in high school, research everybody, because it does affect where you live. The people you vote for where you live is that's affecting you personally.
Exactly.
And so put your ring in the hat, or maybe not run, but just make your voice heard.
Yes.
And people are like, well, it's just one person, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to make that much of a difference. But it does. Every vote matters. Every vote counts. So
there's another question over there. What can us?
Yeah.
Us as Caucasians, I guess you're saying, what can us as Caucasians do? Not us, but you.
That's me. Yeah. Well, not to, I think, one of the things, like I started out with my original post was trying to figure out what I will do, not what I can do. I'm not a politician. I'm not anything. So the only thing I knew that I could do at that time was what I would do. And that was make a post saying, hey, this isn't right. If you see something that's not right, don't be afraid to say it. Don't be afraid to say, I'm going to support this cause. Or, right now we're in the midst of the coronavirus, the COVID-19 thing. And so what can we do? Well, what will you do? What are you going to do? So, all I had was a new pair of shoes that I could have worn, but I didn't, because I wanted that to stick with me, and I wanted it to stick with my family and make a deal. Hopefully that never leaves my daughter's mind of my dad ran 2.23 miles holding a pair of shoes. I hope that sticks with her. And so maybe as Caucasians, we can just start loving on our brothers and sisters of any color. It doesn't have to be just black. It could be Latina and, Asian, whatever, and if I'm saying the wrong way, I'm sorry, but that's the thing. Like, sometimes we're afraid to say stuff, I believe, because, we just don't know. I don't want to say it incorrectly and offend somebody, but I think I've reached the deal where I'm going to say it and just ask you for forgiveness and just hope that you can see my heart. And if I do misspeak, I hope that you see that I'm really just trying to have a conversation and understand where you're coming from. And so, Carrie, to answer your question, that's what I would say is find something that you will do, not what you can do, but what you will do. Yeah. And then just don't be afraid to have the conversations. And maybe you even have to start and preface it by saying, I may say something wrong and offend you, but know that that's not my heart. I just don't know another way to say it, or I don't know another way to ask it, or I'm asking because I don't have a clue. Some of these things that Cliff was saying to me on our first conversation was I didn't have a clue about some of these things, and it just wasn't in my wheelhouse. I'd never dealt with it. I'm a 33-year-old white guy that's a pretty big dude, and so I'm not afraid of a whole lot. I mentioned that to you, Cliff, when we first talked. I'm more scared of things happening to my wife and my daughters and me not being able to control a situation, but I'm never afraid for my own life. I'm never afraid of people coming after me or anything like that, So
The other thing I thought about, going back to, I guess, Whitney's question, right? What can we do other than, us kind of having, conversations and things like that? Uh, continue to outrage, right? Not in a bad way, but channel that outrage into action. But then later on, when the court case happens, right, the same outrage and the bewilderment that we had, if the case is somehow not prosecuted or doesn't go right, what hold people accountable. That's the only, the local police, I don't think, are the ones that kind of arrested the people. It was the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, right? So it wasn't the local people, I don't think. And so those people need to be held accountable. That's what I believe. So we continue to hold people accountable and continue to when the court is in I guess in session or gets through the process, we continue that same anger, bewilderment, confusion, questioning, and all those different things. Continue that, but channel it, at some point, because it's going to be more after this.
yeah,
And sadly, this is one of those things of, this is becoming every 2 or 3 months, or just last night there was something else that happened with the EMT worker, and so this is becoming the norm, So we can't sweep it on under the rug and say, okay, every 3 years or 5 years this happens. No, this is happening. This is just the things that we're hearing about and seeing.
Yeah, and I think it really goes back to what you're saying with just replace your son or daughter in the headlines, or even you could turn it around and say replace your dad or your mom or your sister, your aunt, your uncle, your grandparents. I mean, it doesn't matter about past. I mean, we all have a past, man. Like, I shouldn't be here. There's things that happened to me that it was by the grace of God that I'm still here, that I'm not locked up somewhere. I'm not dead,
Right.
And so I think it just goes back to that, like just being aware, and don't let things go just because it's the easiest thing to do.
Right.
Sometimes taking a stand is one of the harder things you're going to have to do. And you'll probably be standing by yourself sometimes.
Exactly.
But you still have to stand.
Yeah.
So great questions, guys. Thank y'all for asking.
Yeah. Thank y'all.
Awesome. Well, how you feel, man?
I made it, bro.
You made it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, we'll go ahead and sign off. Cliff, stay on for just a second. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're still watching, if you've been watching this from the very beginning, please make sure you hit the like button. Smash that like button. Give me some hearts. And be sure to follow the page or follow the YouTube channel, Matt Willie. I'm all about biblical motivation, inspiration, and teaching, helping you to understand the Bible plain and simple. Because I believe if you can do that, you can have a great relationship with God and grow it and just be blessed in Jesus' name. I love to see people grow spiritually and realize their true citizenship as kingdom ambassadors. So with that, we'll sign off. Make sure you tune in for the next time on What's God Doing.
Good night.